Visual description: a Zoom recording with three people spotlit. Ocean Jennings Sensei, a white man in his early 40s wearing monk's robes and an okesa, is sitting next to a bookshelf with plants and positioned in the upper left corner. Tess Wenderski, a white femme-presenting person with brown hair and wearing a black top, is the ASL interpreter and is in the upper right corner. And David Loy, a white man with graying hair and beard, wearing a brown button-up shirt with a black vest, is sitting in front of a bookshelf, a small Buddhist altar, and various Buddhist artwork and books. After the first second, spotlight is removed from Ocean's video. For the remainder, David is on screen giving the talk next to Tess, who is interpreting into American Sign Language.
So we're honored and excited to have David Loy with us. Thank you.
Wow, thank you much, Ocean, for those kind words. Um, Lovely introduction. I'm really very pleased to be able to come back to you again. Um, I think the last time I spoke was almost a year and a half ago, and a lot's happened since then, right? Uh, Not all of it for the better, uh, but I'll come back to that. Um, what I'd like to do is to talk, if you notice the title, to talk about this kind of strange question: what is the meaning of life? And I'd like to start with a Zen story, um, where, in fact, the Chinese Chan master was asked by one of his students, "What's the meaning of life?" Uh, I wonder if any of you remember the answer to it. Actually, we're not together in a Zendo, so it's kind of hard to ask that, huh? But probably you don't, because I just made up that story. I'm not aware of any particular Mondo or koan that addresses it correctly, directly. Although, of course, lots of koans, lots of Zen stories are relevant here. Um, I wonder, though, what the response of the Zen teacher might be in that situation. Would he slap the student or poke him in the tummy? Or maybe if he's drinking some tea at the time, maybe just, drink the tea more mindfully, more non-dually. Um, I mean, one answer, and I think it's a basic Zen answer, is right. The meaning of life is to live it fully, to be here and now, uh, to become one with whatever it is that we're doing. But of course, we're often not, right? What did John Lennon say? Life is what happens while you're making other plans. So often we're not here and now. We tend to be either bogged down in memories of the past, or maybe more often planning for what we're going to do in the future. This kind of fits in with something that I like to talk about: the sense of lack that shadows the usual sense of self. I sometimes talk about this because, from a Buddhist perspective, which denies the delusion of a separate self, we can say our usual sense of self is a construct. It's a psychological and social construct that can be deconstructed and reconstructed. And that's one way to understand our practice. And be, because of that, the sense of self, since it doesn't refer to anything sort of real, substantial, we could say that the sense of self, the usual sense of self, is inherently sort of uncomfortable or insecure. there is nothing there that could be secured. And so I think we often experience that as a sense of lack, as the feeling that something is wrong with me, something is missing, something isn't quite right. And then we become preoccupied with what I often call lack projects, these things we're going to achieve that are going to make us feel more substantial, more whole, fill up this sense of lack. Right? I'll be okay when I have enough money, or I'm famous enough, or I'm powerful enough, or I've got the perfect body, sexy body. There's a lot of problems there, given that these are just symptoms of the fundamental issue, the sense of self, sense of lack. They don't work. Doesn't matter how much money I might accumulate, it's not going to fill up that sense of lack. But the other issue there, of course, is that it makes us future preoccupied. Again, we're preoccupied. Right now, there's a sense of something isn't quite good enough. But in the future, when I have what I need or what I think I need, then everything will be okay. And of course, as long as I have this sense of lack, often the sense of lack is connected with the question of the meaning of my life. I mean, the meaning of my life is find some way to fill up this sense of lack. But the really interesting question that I want to focus on this morning is, where does the meaning of one's life come from? If we're able to escape that trap of the lack projects, where does the meaning come from? In one way, we could say that historically, if you go way back, obviously it has a lot to do with surviving and reproducing ourselves, right? So, you know, people, couples, cultures, groups that didn't do that well, they tended to disappear, right? So that is sort of built into us. It's important to reproduce, and until quite recently, to have lots of kids, because often lots would die in childbirth and childhood, and then the population has expanded. Now that's not such a problem, right? According to the United Nations, our population is about 8 billion, little more maybe, and looks like it's going to extend, it's going to continue, maybe get up to 10 billion, but then it's apparently going to shrink. So something that people have been very concerned about, for much of my lifetime, it seems like it's not going to be such a problem unless you're the Chinese government or Elon Musk, who are concerned about whether, the contraction will be too great and we won't have enough people. It seems to me the impact of our species on the earth has been so great. I think it might be a very good thing if we have fewer people. But if you have the idea that, you want continuous economic growth and all that, then, you want to keep this expansion going, despite the fact that the ecological crisis, reminds us there are limits. I think we can see, there's this tension between the fantasy of infinite growth and what the ecological crisis is showing us, that isn't possible on a finite Earth, right? Anyway, getting back to the meaning of life, usually we tend to accept, I think largely unconsciously, the meanings that our society offers us, right? We just grow up and we just kind of take it for granted, right? family, friends, today increasingly the media, right? So we learned from them, what's important, what to value, what to seek, how to live. In other words, the meaning of my life tends to be sort of taken for granted as part of the objective way that the world just is. But once we reflect on it, we might conclude that the meaning of life, we might say, well, that's a kind of a silly question, right? Obviously, the meaning of my life, well, that's something for me to decide, right? By myself and for myself. It's my life after all, right? Or is it? What does that supposed freedom assume? A contemporary secular perspective? I was raised as a Catholic, and very early on, I learned in catechism, right? Why did God make us? To know, love, and serve Him, right? Very clear what the meaning of life is or what it better be, it should be, right? It's important to believe in God and do what He, of course it's a He, right? He says to avoid trouble or eternal damnation. So the meaning of life is just out there, whether or not we accept it, it's there. And actually, in some ways, it's not all that different, I think, for the Asian Buddhist traditions, right? If you think about for the lay people, the reality is that for them, the whole idea of nibbana, nirvana, that seems so far away. They're usually more concerned about making merit. I mean, if they're devoted Buddhists, they want to make merit, often usually by giving things to the monastics, because then that will help you gain a better rebirth. Maybe you'll win the lottery in this lifetime, but even if you don't, it'll lead to maybe rebirth into a better, wealthier family in the future. And even for the monastics, for a lot of the Theravada monastics, I'm thinking of, Southeast Asia now, their idea is that Nibbana is so difficult. It's going to take hundreds of thousands of lifetimes of ardent practice, right? They believe that on a day-to-day level, what is more important is to live in such a way, following all the precepts, being a good monk, so that when people give you stuff, they get lots of merit. The amount of merit you get is, according to this story, right? The usual story. People believe that the amount of merit you get is very much connected with the spiritual status of the recipient, right? The general point here, whether you're Catholic or Buddhist, is that the question of the meaning of life is something that's provided by religion. And you could say, in a way, maybe that's the most important or one of the most important functions of religion. Again, meaning is out there, it's external, it's objective, it's already provided. The question is simply whether you accept it or not. So which is it, right? Is it objective, or is it, as we're more likely to think today, is it something subjective that it's up for me to decide? Actually, what I want to suggest to you is that both of them are wrong. The idea that meaning is objectively out there or that meaning is simply subjectively to be decided. I think both of those are missing something very important. In a way, because they assume a kind of problem, a subject-object duality. Both of them assume that, something that our practice challenges, right? The duality of a self inside and an objective world outside. And furthermore, one can, and this I think is really interesting, the meaning of life is another example of what Buddhism has always emphasized, interdependence, impermanence, insubstantiality. What I mean by that is, as civilization, as human life has evolved, we can see how the meaning of life has changed. It has evolved as civilization has evolved, as religion has evolved. So let me just try to contextualize this by stepping back for a moment and asking, well, what was the meaning of life in earlier times? If we go back to the earliest, right, so prehistoric beginning of human societies, by which I mean, hunting-gatherer societies, they tend to be very conservative, right? They're not at all concerned about something that we later become concerned about, salvation, right? That's not what they seek. What they want to do is really preserve what they have because, their technologies are pretty basic and there's fundamental threats, right? So for them, you could say the berries, nuts, the fruits, the animals that appear to them are gifts of nature. And sometimes they appeal to gods to help them to make sure that those gifts continue. But again, nothing to do there about qualifying for somewhere better or higher. It's preserving what they've got. In a way, you could say they are already in the Garden of Eden. And then when you get agriculture, it's very interesting. These archaic civilizations like Mesopotamia, Egypt, and in the New World too, right? The Incas, Aztecs, Mayas, those New World civilizations. It's interesting with agriculture, this big change. There's a lot more food and a lot more people, but you've also got to work a lot harder, and the diet tends to be not as good. And then there's the big problem. Once you're settled in one place and you get a larger population, it creates this problem that we've never been able to solve, which is classes, right? You have classes, the ruling classes and the laboring classes. But the other really important thing is that in these civilizations, they make no distinction, for the most part, between secular and sacred, right? It's like that's so important to part, at least in principle, of American society. But for them, it's the same thing. It's like the king, pharaoh, emperor, whatever. It's usually a he, he's not only a secular ruler, but he's either a god or he's the one who communicates most directly with the gods. So there's not that separation between secular and sacred. Along with this, there's also something very interesting about the meaning of life. All of these civilizations that I've read about, they all believe that human beings and human civilization has a role to play in keeping the cosmos working. Right? You think about the sacrifices, the rituals, and so forth. Why do they do that? Because humans need to. The Mesopotamians believe that we were created by the gods as their slaves, right? To give them sacrifices, build ziggurat temples and such, right? Also, you think about the Aztecs. If you know anything about the Aztecs, it's probably this horrible thing that they like to drag these war captives up to the top of their pyramids and kill them, right, with a knife, cut out their still beating heart, offer it to the gods. Why would they do something gruesome like that? Because they felt that was necessary to keep the gods happy. And if you didn't do it, again, society, the cosmos would break down, right? So this combination of secular and sacred, it's also clear what the meaning of life is. Our life is to perform one's role socially and religiously in keeping this society working. You've got to do that, or if people don't do that, everything's going to fall apart. You see, and then that changes pretty radically after the Bronze Age collapses, like 11th, 12th century in Eurasia, right? And we get a new kind of religion, which today is still the primary kind of religion. We call them axial age religions or salvation religions, right? Because the goal is to escape, to transcend this world of suffering. We need to be saved from it. So this includes Abrahamic religions, right? Judaism, Christianity, Islam, but also Asian ones like Advaita Vedanta and Buddhism. And what's built in here, it's not simply a matter of doing the rituals, making the sacrifices. Now, in order to escape and transcend, we have to transform ourselves in order to qualify for salvation, right? So you think about Christianity. You got to have faith, you got to live in a certain kind of way. But even in Buddhism, the focus is different, but it's the same thing. We need to wake up, right? We need to realize something about the nature of the world. And according to early Buddhism, Theravada Buddhism, the result would be that we're not reborn into this world of suffering. It's not always clear what that lack of rebirth means. Is it because we're somewhere else? What does that mean? But definitely this world is a problem. It's samsara, place of suffering, place of greed, ill will, delusion. But if you think about it, that creates a real problem, right? That makes this world, it devalues this world into a means, so, a locus where we want to qualify for somewhere better. It's simply a means. This world is simply a means to that higher end, right? It devalues this world. And, it's a really important question. How much can we connect this with our attitude toward the world today, the way we use it, the way that we abuse it? How much is it connected with the eco-crisis today? It's important to realize, however, that even in the axial age traditions, you have people, mystics, and let's say Zen masters who challenge this dualism, who emphasize we don't actually need to transcend and escape this world. Rather, what we need to do is to transcend our usual way of experiencing it and ourselves in the world. We still live in the era of axial age religions. They still predominate, even while many people no longer quite believe in them. But, they have problems. In particular, modernity has raised questions about this dualism, that there's another reality. You can say it challenges this cosmological dualism. And it's interesting historically how there was a shift. It's like originally, if you go back early Christianity, people seemed to believe in an apocalypse, this great event in which everything would be transformed. And, it's like the world as a whole would be lot good people would go to heaven, bad people would go to hell. Everything is sort of settled. It's interesting how over time that belief was tempered. In the time of Jesus, people believed it was going to happen very soon. But over time, it's interesting, as we have lost belief in this higher reality, the idea of transformation has shifted. And now it's not another reality, but it's a future reality. That is to say, many of us don't believe in that, the idea of going to this other reality, but it's become secularized into what we call as progress. Progress, which it has provided a great deal of the meaning in the modern world. You think about economic progress, right? Technological development, political, the world becoming more democratic, right? Social progress, getting rid of slavery, LGBTQ rights, women's liberation, socialism, etc. Right? The whole idea that the world is getting better or it can get better, right? But what about if we don't believe that the meaning of now is that it's going to get better? Let me quote John Gray. In pre-Christian Europe, he says, human life was understood as a series of cycles. History was seen as tragic or comic, but not redemptive. It's not a redemption. And then with Christianity, it was believed history had a predetermined goal, human salvation. Though they suppress their religious content, secular humanists, you see, there's a similar belief. It's progress. It's, again, according to John Gray, it is obvious that the idea of progress in history is created by the need for meaning. Progress gives us a meaning even if we don't believe in those other spiritual realities. So what happens today when it has become difficult to believe in progress? You can say the modern, postmodern world includes a really deep questioning of, the traditional religious stories, and we don't seem to be at the center of things anymore. Evolution, there's no need for a creator God. Humans are accidents of genetic mutation. Evolution is not going anywhere. There's no special meaning or value in being human, according to that story. And then you get some physicists like Steven Weinberg who says, quote, the more the universe seems comprehensible, the more it also seems to be pointless, meaningless. Another reason why it's become so difficult to believe in progress is the situation we're in right now, right? It's not enough to talk about climate change. We're aware it's part of a much larger ecological crisis. A few years ago, Noam Chomsky said this is the most dangerous time in human history. He mentioned climate change. He mentioned the danger of nuclear war. This was before Russia invaded Ukraine. He mentioned decline of democracy. Sorry, how to say it. He mentioned decline of democracy. This was before January 6th. When Trump tried to stay in power, this was before Trump was reelected. In other words, I think he's right. This is the most dangerous time in human history. In fact, frankly, it's become somewhat more dangerous since he said that. I think it was September of 2020. Taking it all into account, we do seem to be a civilization that has lost its way, and that seems to be self-destructing. So again, what does this mean for the meaning of life? First of all, how do you react when you hear me say that? How does it make you feel? Sad? Depressed? Despairing? Excited? For me, many different feelings at different times. I'm reminded, for example, of Lord of the Rings, Tolkien's book, in that I remember what Frodo says to Gandalf, I wish it need not have happened in my time, right? Something I expect we all have thought at one time or another. So do I, said Gandalf, and so do all who live to see such times. But that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us. Got to make the best of it. But then Joanna Macy says something just the opposite. Quote, I feel so fortunate to be alive now. People might think I'm crazy, but just speaking personally, it's an incredible thing to be alive with my fellow humans at a time when the future looks so bleak. Right now, we can be here to honor life, she says. A precious thing to be given thanks, rather than insisting it has to last forever. Which is true? Lord of the Rings, Joanna Macy? Which is true for you? Maybe both at different times? It does seem to me that today, for young people in particular, it's really hard to believe that the future will be better than the past. I think it must be very difficult to be, say, a teenager today. Very difficult to avoid a kind of pessimism, maybe even nihilism, addiction. It's, so many people get caught up in deaths of despair, existential questioning. Without the belief in progress, what is there? Well, there's a religion of consumerism, of course, but that's a false religion that doesn't really make us happy. I always think of what Ivan Illich said, that in a consumer society, there are two kinds of slaves. There's the slaves of addiction and the slaves of craving. The slaves who are able to get what they want and the ones who aren't. Another way to put all this in perspective is to remember that in the archaic empires I talked about before, humans had an essential role to play, right, in keeping the cosmos working. But in our postmodern world, it seems, we don't have any role to play. What's the meaning of human life? We're accidents of evolution. What are we going to do? Well, I guess all we can do is enjoy ourselves, if we can, while we can, as long as we can. But frankly, I think that's not the end of the story, and this is where our Buddhist practice comes in. Belief in individual freedom to choose the meaning of my life, does that assume the individual self that Buddhism challenged? What if we're not separate in that way? If we're not separate from others, not separate from the world, if my well-being isn't separate from yours? What if that's a delusion that our practice can help us see through? According to my teacher in Japan, Yamada Koen Roshi, head of the Sambo Zen, compassion arises naturally with awakening. In which case we can say that the meaning of my life is something that evolves naturally out of realizing that I'm not separate. That my well-being isn't separate from yours. It's not separate from the natural world, from the biosphere, right? In our practice, as Dogen said, we forget ourselves, we let go of ourselves. When we wake up, we realize our non-duality, right? With the 10,000 things, our intimacy with them. And out of that is born, can be born, a new meaning of life, not the old lack project of what's in it for me, trying to fill up this sense of lack or inadequacy, but an opening up where we can ask, wow, we're all part of each other. What can I do? What can we together do to make this a better world for everyone? This reminds me of a couple Zen stories. What should we do when difficult times come? I forget who the Zen master was, but I don't forget his reply. Welcome them. Welcome them. Welcome these difficult times, right? You can say our path isn't about avoiding difficult times. In fact, I think that's when the deepest personal transformation tends to happen. According to another story, a student asked Chan Master Yunmen, Unmon in Japanese, what is the fruit of a lifetime of practice? And he replied, responding appropriately. But the big koan, how do we do that today? The reason I emphasize this is when we see through this duality of separation, it seems to me that there's something wonderful. You remember how the archaic civilizations, we had an important role to play. Well, it turns out, yes, today too, we have a really important role to play in doing what we can to help our societies and the natural world to heal. We can realize, we can wake up to the fact that we are being called upon to do what we can in that direction, right? It's like all hands on deck. If this is, as Chomsky says, the most dangerous time in human history, we are being called. And the wonderful thing about our Zen practice is that it encourages this quiet where we can hear that call, where we can sense it. As I approach a conclusion here, let me give you two quotations. The first is by Bill McKibben, talking about the meaning of life. Quote, I think the meaning of life is to keep the remarkable game of being human going forward. In the past, this meant reproducing, above all. But now it means, above all, preserving the board on which we play this game, right? The earth. And since we're now setting that board on fire, it's our job to put the fire out. In our time, that's the most important task we can undertake, since all depends on it. The best thing about the human game is that it potentially can stretch out far into the future, but only if we act now. One of the people, I want to offer another quote by Tom Rivet Carnac. And I don't know much about him, except he was one of the architects of the Paris COP agreement, right? He puts it maybe best of all. You have the biggest opportunity in all of human history to live an incredibly meaningful life. The actions that you take because of the accident of the time of your birth, in other words, that we were born now in this critical time, these actions are an order of magnitude in importance, right? Like 10 times compared to most people who've ever lived before. Because you are going to affect the future of life on Earth. In 50, 500, and 500,000 years by what you do in the next couple of decades. So, no one is asking for an easy life. Really deep down, we're asking for a meaningful life. And that meaning is there, we can say, if we open up to it, if we can hear it, right? And it seems to me, from this context, we can say the most important thing that Buddhism has to offer is this bodhisattva path with its double focus. As Nisargadatta liked to say, the Neo-Vedantin whom I like to quote, when I look inside and see that I am nothing, that is wisdom. When I look outside and see that I am everything, that is love. Between these two, my life flows, right? And of course, the love he talks about, it's not a feeling, right? It's a way of living in the world. It's a way of relating to each other and the earth that embodies this realization, this wisdom of non-separation, right? So I think that is giving us this answer, right? About the question of the meaning of life. And of course, we don't know if anything we do is going to be successful. We can't know that, but we're being called upon to do the best we can. The Buddhist tradition doesn't give us specific answers. It couldn't, right? It evolved in Asia in pre-modern times. But the tradition does give us the way to find out the specific things. And in fact, one way I kind of try to crystallize that is by offering what I call 3 questions or 3 reflections, which I think fit very well into our practice, right? Number 1, what do I have to offer? Taking into account everything about my life, my situation. Number 2, given what I have to offer, what are the good possibilities for me? And third, of those possibilities, what really calls to my heart? I think this is a wonderful way that can help us recuperate, realize the meaning of our lives today in this very dangerous time. I like to end with something Mark Twain said. The 2 most important days in your life are the day you are born and the day you find out why. May we all find out why. Thank you.